All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. This conversation is going to be another one of my ongoing New Jersey-centric videos I've been posting to this channel. My guest is someone who I've been seeing live and seeing at shows for probably 30-ish years at this point. But oddly enough, we just met officially just a few weeks back. So I want to take advantage of that opportunity and have you on the show and talk about your history. It's my great pleasure to welcome Joe Pugsley. Joe, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Joel. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. As we were just saying before I started recording, and as I already knew, for the most part, you have a pretty extensive history in music in New Jersey. Like I said, you were around and have been around for a long time. And there's a lot of bands, there's a lot of things to catch in the net in this conversation. So I'll definitely need your help filling in any blanks or continuity errors along the way in the things I've been able to gather about you. Um, and there's a lot of stuff in the present too to talk about, which is always cool because that's always the most important period of time. But let's start really kind of at the very beginning of things. Are you originally from Jersey?
Yeah, I grew up in Bloomfield.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. I know the area well. So, um, when and how did music first sort of take hold of you to where you'd end up doing it for so many years now?
I mean, it grabbed me really young, early teens. I used to play wiffle ball with my cousin, and he introduced me to, Led Zeppelin and old Aerosmith. Um, and a lot, and that stuff really grabbed me, really got my curiosity going. And, as I got older and got into high school, we started forming bands and I started getting into, punk and, you know, hardcore and other more underground styles of music. And my friends and I started forming bands and going to shows. And uh, I think we put our first 7 inch out while we were juniors in high school. So
Oh, wow.
93 or so. So I mean, ever since then, haven't gone, more than maybe a few months without being in a project of some kind or another. So
Cool. And what was that record you put out when you were in junior high or a junior in high school?
it was a Puggle 7 inch with my friends Chris and Kevin. I think it was called You're Not Invited. Yeah.
So Puggle really was the first band that you had where you kind of hit the ground running and started doing things properly as a band member.
Yeah, yeah, probably, yeah.
That's
Well, no, actually we did a thing called Pretty Flower, I should say, before that. That was the first project that, played. I think we played Studio One, we might have played Pipeline. That was with my friend Chris, who eventually played in Pogo with me as well. And we played a lot of hardcore shows, oddly enough, even though we didn't really know what we were doing, but we had some heavier songs. And that sort of, evolved into Pogo. Yeah.
Now you said 93, and you and I are roughly the same age. I think you have a year on me, so we're pretty close in age. So 93 is really when I started going to the pipeline and hearing the bands that were doing things around that time. To throw a couple of names right off the bat that I know you have some connection to, I.D.K and Shirk Circus come to mind immediately. As bands that were around. I think my first proper real band too played the pipeline. It was us, I.D.K, Flatus, and Shirk Circus, but Shirk canceled that day. But the other bands played, and I was 16 years old, and that was the fall of 1993. So, I mean, we're kind of around the same point. We kind of started around the same time. So, and you mentioned the pipeline, Studio One, classic place in Jersey. What else was around at that time as far as shows that you guys would go and perform at?
Back then, there were tons of VFWs and DIY shows going on all over the place. There were venues. Oof, now you're having me log my memory. At that time, I mean, Connections came a little bit after, I think. There were spots all over. Yeah, there was Under Acme in New Brunswick. I remember. And making me log my memory. I'm not sure. There were a lot of spots.
And I hadn't actually realized Puggle dates back that far with you. Because you guys had a pretty lengthy run, if I recall, right? This went on for a few years with that band.
Yeah, well, we started Puggle, and I would jump in and I did some other projects. So I was in I.D.K for a bit, um, and then we formed that's right, we formed a different version of Puggle with Josh from Shirk Circus was playing bass. My friend Paul, who's unfortunately no longer with us as well, on drums, and Bob who was on guitar. And actually, that Josh recorded that in his basement of his parents' house.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
Um, so I got.
I was going to say you mentioned Josh Silverman, um, and his name has come up a few times on this channel. I had John Steele on last year, who will come up later in this conversation, I'm sure. And I knew of Josh around the same time too. I didn't meet him until about 97 or so, but I remember Shirk Circus that he fronted. He was a guitarist and singer in that band. They definitely had a moment there in that period of time where things were really kind of connecting for them. They were on Bar None. They did two albums, I think, for that label, at least two for them. The first one being Words to Say, which is classic as far as New Jersey music is concerned. So Josh was around for a bit. How did that connection come about? How did you guys first meet and start working together?
It's interesting when we started talking about doing this. I was trying to think if I could remember when I met Josh, and I can't remember. I mean, but I met Josh when I was still in high school. Excuse me. You mentioned Words to Say. I remember he handed me that outside the pipeline. So it's tough trying to do like a timeline. You're going back now 30 plus years. Um, but I did, I used to go to like every show I possibly could at that time. There were basement shows as well. I mentioned venues. I remember for a while they had basement shows up in the Cliffside Park area, where I.D.K used to play and other hardcore bands used to play. Um, as well as there was a spot in Paramus. There were a lot of bands playing up there. But Josh grew up in Nutley, so he was like a couple miles away from me. And Chris as well, Chris Maggio, he lived a couple blocks from Josh. So it was, some of it was, simply proximity and just like minds in certain ways. When I saw Shirk Circus, I remember just being blown away, and just loving it. And at that time, I was kind of like a sponge for music or anything that I thought was really good or intense or had that kind of spark to it, I guess, so to speak. And Josh definitely had that. He definitely had, personality and the tunes to back it up. And we just got tight pretty close, pretty quickly, I should say. Uh, and we started working together in different projects and doing different things. And by 90, I think that 7 inch came out in 95. 94, 95. It's tough. Like I mentioned, we did the 7 inch in 93. By 94, I did a stint in I.D.K. Um, 95, Puggle had the second 7 inch, Who Needs You, which Josh recorded. It was 4 songs were recorded in Josh's basement. And then I think 96 or 97 was the year we did the Inger project. And then after that, I got Puggle back together with Chris Maggio, Chris Greenspan, and this dude named Odd on guitar. So yeah, it was a little bit of hopping from project to project. Um, but yeah, Josh and I got kind of tight, and we became friends and hung out for all through those years, all through that time.
One thing I always really enjoyed about Josh's work, and a lot of your stuff too, has this thread I find as well. Yeah, hardcore and punk, we'll call it, may have been like the entry point for you musically, but I think a lot of the stuff you've done, which we'll get into, um, is a little more, it's closer to the big star than Black Flag. You know what I mean? There's definitely a lot of pop sensibility and songwriting sensibility to your stuff, and that's something Josh really possessed as well. Shirk Circus was a very different band. than a lot of the other ones that were around. Although they could play a show with my band or Flatus or anything like that, they were a little more sort of that classic power pop feel with punk kind of mixed in there. If that makes an apt description or not, he was a little bit Paul Westerberg versus some of the other guys that were around. There was a lot of like
Hmm.
hard rock type people around, like Steve Miller, who's our friend, of course, and Backseat Driver was playing it, and that was a whole scene. Josh was kind of an outlier in a lot of ways. He was a little bit more in tune with that sort of power pop feel about things. I always found, you know, um, when you started playing with Josh, I mean, because again, you've had a lot of that in your sound as well over the years. Was that sort of something that came from working with Josh, or was that sort of more pop leaning thing always something that you had musically?
Well, thanks for noticing that or even having that perception. That's cool. Yeah, there was no, it's something that a sensibility I'd like to think I had definitely before I met Josh. We also have Enough's Enough connection, right? We're both Enough's Enough fans. And I can tell you, I remember seeing um, that video for New Thing when I was 14 or 15 and not understanding what it was, but hearing the song and saying, there's something about this. There's
Mm.
something unique about this, and it really grabbed me in a way that other songs didn't. And I also that kind of led me to, Cheap Trick and Big Star and the Replacements. So yeah, that's definitely there. And um, you know, working with Josh and knowing Josh, it may have, heightened those sensibilities or expanded them perhaps because he was a phenomenal musician. Um, but yeah, it was there before. Perhaps that shared interest helped helped us gravitate towards each other. But yeah, he was definitely an outlier in more ways than one. But musically, sure,
Yeah,
there's definitely a power pop aspect to it, and it's something I'm conscious of, and it's a sort of subgenre that I enjoy a lot. Big Star is huge. Love that stuff. Like I said, Cheap Trick, the Sid Bader's Disconnected album is big for me. Replacements. Yeah, anything that's aggressively poppy
right,
is kind of fun.
right, right. So, kind of keeping within this sort of mid 90s time frame, I'm trying to think of when I first saw you play. And I, it's tough because a lot of things blur during that time.
Yeah, oh, sure, sure.
There's a lot of bands, and you were in a couple, so it was kind of like, did I see him with here? I want to say it was either with Josh. I remember distinctively it was like an acoustic thing. It was either you or Josh or you and Trance. Could that be possible, or am I
It's
mixing?
all possible. Yeah, it's certainly possible. Yeah, someone dug up a picture. I have it on my Facebook, I think, of me and Josh playing acoustic at the Pipeline,
Hmm.
which is cool. But I don't remember the show. I have no idea what the hell it is. We probably just put the set together and decided to play. I mean, back then, you know, that was just what we did. Um, Acoustic with Trance, I'm not sure. He used to always jump up with us during the late '90s version because we used to cover a Junk Monkeys song. I don't remember which song it was. If you remember that band, they're kind of power pop band. Only had a couple of records out. And he used to jump up and sing it with us. I used to have pictures of that, but I'm not sure where they are now. Um, yeah, yeah. With Trance, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's certainly possible. I have
Yeah,
evidence of acoustic shows with Josh, and I remember doing that kind of thing, but I'm not sure about the Trance one.
it may have been Josh. The more I think about it. And that I'm not even going to attempt to figure out which venue it was. You said you did something at the pipeline with him. That works for me. I think I'll go with
Yeah,
that.
it probably was.
Just
Probably was.
there's too many gears spinning, from that time.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, I can speak for myself solely, so I'll take responsibility. Um, I wasn't always in the clearest of minds back then, so a lot of things get hazy in more ways than one. Uh,
Right.
but I definitely remember you were gigging with Josh, you were doing things with Puggle. Um, Another band I heard back then but never got to see live that I know was part of this scene as well was a band called Bernie's Fix. Um, I used to love their song Trendy Wendy, still do.
Yeah.
And I think I heard that song on a compilation, God knows, probably 95. And I think it may have been, I think Shirk was on it too, and maybe Felix Frump. Like all those bands from that time were
Yeah.
up on this record. I'm sure someone's watching this going, oh, it was this one. I just can't place it. But I remember that song by Bernie's Fix, and then shortly thereafter, um, not being terribly familiar with them, I had heard that the singer in the band, Jeff, had passed away. But from what I've understood in the years since, that was a very important band, and he a very important person to a lot of people. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about Bernie's Fix to kind of put them in the context of this conversation and make sure they're,
Yeah,
represented
sure.
and talked about in some way here.
Sure. Bernie Six were great. They were great. Yeah, I remember that time. I remember when Jeff passed. I remember I was coming back from Rhode Island, visiting my girlfriend at the time, and my drummer had stopped by to tell me, but I wasn't home, so he told my mother, this is pre-internet days. And then my mother picked me up at the train station and told me, and I just sunk. I was 18, I think, maybe 19. So it was the first person I had known really who had passed at that young age. I think he was just 24. But Bernie's was great. I mean, Jeff had this, he wrote some killer songs that were aggressively poppy, but had that punk edge, and the way he used to yell was very unique when he really enunciate, start kind of scream sing. It was very unique, and just great songs. The Current is another great one. In fact, now that you talk about the Josh acoustic stuff, we used to play that one. We used to play it acoustically. Yeah, I mean, Jeff was great, and the band was great, and yeah, I mean, we weren't best friends, but we knew each other from the scene and hung out, and yeah, that's when we all started dabbling here and there, so no one's really no room to judge anybody, but he struggled, and unfortunately he passed, and it was tough. It was tough on everybody, clearly, especially those who were much closer to him than I was.
Yeah. Fortunately, there are recordings available online. There is a Bandcamp page for Bernie's Fix.
Hmm.
If anybody's new to that band, because I was listening to it a little bit myself recently, and it had been a long time. And you're right, great stuff. Sonically, a lot of it sounds really good, considering when it was recorded, early '90s, mid '90s. And there's a lot of that stuff's been preserved. So definitely worth checking out. And that's Fix with three X's at the end, so people can
Yep.
look it up and give that stuff a listen. So you had all these different characters kind of floating around your world and making music with you. And I just mentioned Anthony Trance, and he was certainly a colorful person in that scene. And for those who don't know, I'm assuming if people are watching this video, they probably know some of this stuff already. But for those who kind of fell into a rabbit hole and landed here, Anthony Trance, the late Anthony Trance, he was a promoter in New Jersey, booked the Pipeline, he booked the connections in Clifton. He was also a musician. He was in a band called Sacred Denial, which was a hardcore band in the 80s. They were contemporaries with AOD and Pleased Youth and that stuff. Later had a band called Lucy's Trance, one of the great lost bands of New Jersey, featuring Dave Scott from AOD on drums. Great, great hard rock band, like chef's kiss perfect band. And he later played with a group of people from the area called Johnny and the Has-Beens. There's an amazing record. Josh was the guitarist on that album, and John Steele was on drums. Great performer, really cool guy. I actually didn't sit and have a proper chat with him until shortly before he had passed away, but I'm glad that happened. Because he was always running around doing promoter shit when I was dealing with him, like those crazy Thursday nights at the Pipeline. But you and Trance did a lot of work together musically, correct? You guys had a pretty nice connection there for a bit.
We didn't do too much together musically, but we had a good connection for sure. We were friends. I got pretty tight with him as well. We used to hang out, like you mentioned, the Thursday nights. I was at the Pipeline almost every Thursday. Um, and then connections when he started booking over there. Yeah, we became friends. We were tight. Through Josh as well. Josh was around. You mentioned Bernie's. I remember when we put on the Bernie's Fix memorial show at the Pipeline. Not that it was just us three. I mean, plenty of people have had to put a lot of work into that. But I remember it being in the basement of the Pipeline with Josh and Trance, kind of brainstorming about putting something together. And I think about that now that they're both gone, just that moment. And I remember Trance just going, it just sucks. This just sucks, And then it was only 2 years later, right? He was gone. Um, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned these colorful personalities around me. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, I think back, Josh's and Jeff's and Anthony's. I mean, these guys are real deal. They had that unique aspect to them, the kind of spark that used to, a sort of spark that used to draw me in. I'd like to think, or at least I perceive it that way. And he was amazing, and he had great rock and roll sensibilities. As you mentioned, with the Lucy's too, it's Lucy's Trance. It's unfortunate that we don't have that stuff, right? I don't think that's up anywhere. Kind of
Couple of
lost.
songs are
Oh,
Dave
are they?
put up some stuff like in the last year.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Maybe you could send me that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Trance was great, and that was another death that hit me really, really hard, and a lot of people from the scene, because he was such a fixture in the scene and consistent, constant effort and booking, and he also booked Coney on High for a while as well.
Well, the thing about someone like Trance is you really understand the importance of one person in a scene.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody's collectively doing stuff is sometimes difficult to really understand a person's individual impact. But when he passed away, from my perspective, everything changed in that area. It was a big void there for a while. Yes, shows went on. I mean, the pipeline, you know, ended shortly thereafter for other reasons. But there was definitely a vibe shift after he passed away, I found. It wasn't the same. And I think the shows when he was putting them on were so great because he just had a knack for figuring out what would work, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There was certainly a vibe shift. And we mentioned his rock and roll, or maybe I mentioned his rock and roll sensibilities, and that was kind of absent too. After he was gone. From a selfish kind of perspective, I think he genuinely liked what I was doing. So he would keep me in mind for certain things, which obviously helped me and whatever the bands we were working on at the time. But yeah, yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I wasn't sure and I felt it at the time, and I remember thinking I wasn't sure if it was just me or, sometimes it's difficult to draw the line between, your subjective experience and, what's objectively happening. So that can get tricky. But yeah, from my perspective, for sure, yeah, it felt like there was a void. Someone that really got it, but he also but had no pretense. He wasn't like a pretentious guy. He was as down to earth and chill as you could get,
I
Yeah, there's definitely a void.
I realized that towards the end because as I said, when I was doing with him, it was typically getting a phone call, I want to book your band for this Thursday night. And then you get to the show and it's usually crazy. Or one or both of us ended up in no condition to talk. So you kind of missed the chance to just sit down and talk to someone. And I was at Connections. This is, that summer when he passed. I was at Connections. I think the Subterraneans were playing actually.
Great
Uh,
band.
and he was at the bar, and it wasn't a huge crowd. It was a very comfortable sized crowd, so you didn't feel like you were on top of anybody. And I just walked over and started talking to him, and we had like the coolest conversation. I'm like, wow, Anthony's a really nice guy. Not that he wasn't at any time, but when he wasn't like bouncing between 50 different things, he seemed to be pretty solid, and maybe I just call him at a really great night, but he was totally engaging. We had this really lovely conversation. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, he had passed away, if my memory serves me well.
It was
Uh,
97, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
97.
yeah, 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 would have been.
Well, I mean, we all had our egos on our bad days, you know what I mean? But it didn't take much to chisel through, and just find the guy, just be normal. I mean, yeah, he was great memories, man.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I like when his name comes up. I had a three-part series with Emilio last year, and
Yeah, it was great. I saw it.
yeah, and obviously Trance came up on that. So, the big thing for me with doing these conversations is mentioning those people, who've been gone a few years, because, now there's an opportunity for people who are learning about the Jersey history. Let's say they have these figures they can kind of look back on and go, okay, well, these people were important and they had an impact, and we're still talking about them in 2025. So, that says it all. Um, and I don't want to keep taking you down dark alleys and talking about
No,
people
no, no.
who do
Please,
anymore.
let's
Uh,
go.
but there's a lot of them, unfortunately,
It's okay, man. It's okay. I'm cool with it.
And you mentioned her briefly earlier, but I want to bring Inger Lorre proper into this conversation, because I know you and Josh had a moment where you were working with Inger. So obviously this was when she had come back to Jersey after the Nymphs thing. I'm assuming so. This would have been around this mid '90s time frame.
I think it was 95, maybe 94 into 95, something like that.
Yeah. And it was you and Josh backing her up at that point, right? Do I have that right?
Correct. I mean, it's just as much from my angle a Josh story as an Inger story. Because Josh was just like just this huge personality, and he'd always just he had a flair for the dramatic, and he'd call me up and like the way he'd present us something, he'd have these great stories, and all right, wait, let me tell you, and he'd just launch into this crazy long story, and he'd call me up and he's like, Inger's playing Brownies, man. We gotta go. I'm like, who? Like, admittedly, I didn't know about the Nymphs. I didn't know anything about it. Um, and he tells me the whole story, you know, what she's famous for and all that, the whole thing. And it's funny. I mean, we used to go into the city all the time on little adventures, and this was just at the time, it just seemed like another adventure. Going to Brownies, all right, cool. I like that club. Let's go. We're gonna meet some girl who came from some band. All right, whatever, let's go. And I used to like it half the time because, his old man had a Lincoln and Josh didn't like to drive. So he'd drive over to my house and be in the passenger seat and I get to drive the Lincoln. So half the time I'm like, am I driving? Yeah, I'm like, cool. Bring your dad's Lincoln. So we drive into the city and yeah, we went to see them play at Brownies and he's telling me the whole story and making it sound all exciting in a way. And but we went to see them play and the band wasn't that good. So I couldn't really see anything. I didn't get a proper understanding of what Inger did musically from that show. And plus we were, you know, Josh is funny though. I mean, he'd have these crazy ideas and go there, but then he didn't want to talk, he didn't want to talk to her. So um I remember we went across the street to some bodega and we were like drinking St. Ides malt liquor to get a buzz or whatever. So we'd be able to try to finagle her number from her. But yeah, anyway, we went back in and, I just lied to my teeth. I'm like, I'm a huge fan, man. Like we could put together a better band, backup band. Yeah. And by that time I was lit. But whatever. She bought it and gave me a number. That was true. I didn't know we could put a better band than the backup band she was using. But I mean, through that, I didn't even know anything about her or her musicality or her talent, frankly.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so that's how it happened. I got her number, and that's kind of what started that project. It was basically Shirk Circus plus me
Mhm.
with Inger, and we did two or three shows. We played Brownies, we played CB's, maybe somewhere else, I'm not sure. Um, but then I left, and Josh left not too long after that, and I'm pretty sure that Frank and Dan are on the recording. Uh, Frank and Dan did end up playing on the what became that Triple X record. Uh, but yeah, I mean, shortly after that, yeah, so we did start jamming, we did put the band together, and it wasn't long before I realized what a talent Inger was, and very quickly gained a real appreciation for uh, playing with her and performing with her. It was a unique thing, man, to be able to play and look over and see her really belting in something out. Um, because man, when she performed, she was in it, man. She was in it. And that's always to me a sign of a great artist when they get completely lost in what they're doing. There's like unity, with the art, and she really did that in a I get a little, I don't want to say choked up, but I get a little, it's inspirational to even to think about, because that's the goal. That's the goal to be able to get lost in it. And she really did. Um, and just the songs too, simple songs, simple chord structures, uh, but amazing lyrics and amazing execution. Uh, and not what I ever would have imagined from that first night meeting her. I didn't really know, like I said, what I was getting into. And also, I always had a sort of affinity for the 80s rock and roll too. I mentioned Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin, but I was just as much into Appetite for Destruction. So I really loved the 80s element that she had
Mm.
from the Nymph stuff because we played that stuff. We played Imitating Angels, we played Sad and Damned, we played, songs I can't remember their names, but we did 7B and She's Not Your Friend, and um, it was an amazing set. It was a great time. I mean, but it was also a time where I was really learning talk about the dark alleys. I mean, Jeff passed, Anthony passed, and now I'm hanging out with a bunch of people who are doing harder drugs, frankly, than I had done up until that point. And, I was really at a sort of fork in the road there, looking back. And there were troubled times, but great experiences came out of it, a few great shows. I'd like to think if it's a good experience, you take something from it, musically or artistically. Yeah, and I mean, come on, I mean, playing second guitar with Shirk Circus backing up Anger. I mean, it was great. It was great, frankly. And this was before all the cell phones and shit, so there's no videos of those shows, but they were great. They were really good. But we dealt with you know, the same behavior that, I watched the Keith's video and clearly, Keith has a long history with anger. Mine was 6 months to a year. I was kind of just passing through uh, her musical life, I guess. Um, but when I watched your video, it was great though, just hearing Keith talk about it and getting a little more background because I didn't really know that much about the early versions of the nymphs. But yeah, I mean, we dealt with the same sort of behaviors and, sort of maladaptive kind of craziness that, people talk about. But you really think when as years go by, I mean, you look back and you think, this person was crazy or out there or whatever, because our behaviors were so unique to the individual at that time or at that age. When you get older, you realize that a lot of this stuff is, we, all- especially a lot of musicians, we came from, you know, low socioeconomic situations, right? We came from a lot of abuse backgrounds, trauma backgrounds, and a lot of the behaviors were I mean, if you go back in time, they'd be easily predictable. So it's easier to, like I mentioned earlier, you don't hold grudges or, if anything, it's sad. If anything, it's sad that she was personally going through that kind of turmoil where she wouldn't show up to things or, or felt a certain way about how she was being perceived or whatever was going on with her. But yeah, she was inconsistent, and she didn't show up to things. And I drove to Boston. He's funny, you speak of Boston. We were supposed to play in Boston. I remember driving to TT Bears, and that was another Inger didn't show situation. She didn't show up, so Shirk played, and I got drunk, watching Shirk.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a great experience. And then when that kind of fizzled out, that's when I formed the other version of a later version of Puggle with some different guys, Chris Maggio, Chris Greenspan, Ord. Um, and that's when I think that, not to change the subject from anger, I'll gladly talk more about that if you want, but that version of Puggle was closer to the sort of power pop stuff that you mentioned. That's when I think I was really kind of finding my own in regards to songwriting and the style of music and where I could, not shine, but flourish, I guess. Uh, Finding my way, so to speak, with songwriting. That was really the sort of genesis. The first couple Puggle records, I was in high school. They were kind of pop punky kind of stuff. And I'm sure, working with Josh and Inger did influence me clearly. I was a sponge at that time, and those experiences are going to influence you. But yeah, I formed a version, my own thing afterwards that I'm pretty proud of
Mm.
looking back.
Well, I mean, I could certainly imagine Inger and Josh in the same space being interesting and the thing about Inger, I only got to know her towards the end, less than a year, roughly a year. It's a very colorful year because of that. But the thing about her is, yes, with the new record or whatever, all the stories come back, right? About, oh, Inger, pissed on Tom Zuzat's desk and did this and did that. And yeah, it's crazy and wild. And there were certainly glimpses of that I got just in messages between her for the final few months. But you know what? If she had said to me, "Do you want to do something?" I would have done it in a heartbeat without hesitation because every note, from my perspective, every note she delivered on stage or on record was absolutely fucking real and was the truth.
Intentional, deliberate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's that chicken or the egg. Did the craziness inspire the talent, or vice? I I have my theories on that. You hit the nail pretty hard on the head just now about maladaptive and all this shit we got to swim through to get to what we're doing. Um, I would have done it in a heartbeat because there was something very pure and genuine about what she did as well. And I think everybody I've spoken to who worked with her kind of reached the same conclusion. That was the real thing. You
Absolutely.
can't fake that. You
No, absolutely not. You know, and that in and of itself is inspirational, and that in and of itself is inspiring. And you take that, all right, I might not be doing the same style or whatever that she's doing, but uh, being deliberate, being intentional, those are lifelong inspirations,
yeah,
not just musical, and again, I lean towards it being sad, uh, that that you know the things that tormented her, you know, got such a loud voice in her head. But that's life. We all have our cross to bear. We all have our own traumas and things that we've gone through. And but yeah, it's a lot. It's easier to reconcile and understand as we get older, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a 23-year-old stepson, and I raised him from the time he was 7, and I think, reaching a certain age, I was in my 30s at that point. I think reaching my 30s and raising him gave me so much more perspective than I had when I was in my 20s. And you learn to not always forgive certain people for their actions, but understand where the actions came from a little more. And I think it gives you a bit of clarity. I have a bandmate in Chicago. We do a band called Pigface now and then. And
Right.
one of the members of the band during the 2019 tour was a bit of a problem. Wasn't Martin Atkins, for the record, someone else. And I was talking to my friend about it, like, it's getting to be an issue. And the guy's like, "Look, man, we're all broken in some way. Why else are we here? Why are we here? We're all broken in some way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in
Right.
doing this shit." And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. So I sort of like let it go. And then that person has been sober now 5 years and is totally
Oh,
cool.
great.
So, something was going on, and instead of like letting it blow up, it's like, all right, well, he's doing with his thing. He'll get there eventually, hopefully. And he did. But he's like, why else would we be doing this if we weren't fucked up?
Yeah, I mean, I had dysregulation issues for sure. I mean, myself for sure. I'm not immune to criticisms of behavioral problems and concerns. You know what I mean? Um, uh, that's why, but that's part of the reason I'm certainly not gonna, throw stones at anybody. You know what I mean? She went through what she was going through, and it certainly wasn't easy for us to deal with, but it wasn't easy for her either. Um, and most of these colorful people that we're talking about, you know, had been through a lot in life, early on, and often the music, it was part of the reason why the music was so good, I think.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
Because you have a need to purge,
Yeah.
when you're struggling or you're going through something and you're autistic, you have a sort of innate need to purge, innate need to like get it out. Like it's sort of like an exorcism of sorts. And if you don't get it out of you, you feel like you're going to explode. Uh, and I think that kind of thing was going on with a lot of these people that we're talking about for sure. And I know if I can include myself in that same uh, group of people, it's certainly the same idea with me.
I don't think any of us just casually walked onto a stage one day because it was there and we decided to do this or
Right.
decided to be a writer or whatever it is that we do, artist. I think we ran to those stages, we ran to those canvases, we ran to those computer screens because we had no other fucking choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I absolutely believe that. And that's why you see these amazing people that we've been lucky to cross paths with along the way. Unfortunately, they burn very brightly, and that's what made them beautiful. But the flames don't last forever, so we have lost a lot of people. But my God, well, just think of what they left, you know. And not that the ends justify the means. I'd much rather have them all here, obviously. But at least they left something beautiful in their wake. You know what I mean? It's like they
Sure.
they sang their song and then they left. You know, there's something kind of beautiful in that too. That they said what they had to say, and then that was what they left us with. Um, I was going to say onto a more positive topic, although I'm not quite sure because it's one of the darkest and most beautiful records I've ever heard. Makes me cry, and it's you and Josh again. Gonna fast forward a couple years here. The Dark Brothers, Karma Kills. One of my favorite records from Jersey by far, by far. What an album! And the
Thank
Dark,
you.
yeah, really, truly, truly. And I gotta thank our mutual friend Kevin at Homebrew Studios for hooking me up with that stuff. Um, I went to record with Kevin for the first time in over a decade. He's like, dude, listen to this. Dude, have you heard this?
My My
he was,
one of my cheerleaders.
oh yeah, he was playing me all the stuff, and he played, played me that Dark Brothers stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, wow, wow, like
Different time.
this is Shirk and the other stuff next level, in my opinion. And you also have my favorite drummer from New Jersey, John Steele, in the band. So, I mean, talk about a perfect combination of people. What led to the formation of the Dark Brothers?
Yeah, probably now you're going, yeah, you fast forward a few years, oh 03, oh 04, maybe. I was hanging out, a mutual friend of Josh's, my friend Davey, and he had told me that Josh was in rehab. Now, me and Josh hadn't spoken in a couple of years because, we kind of had it out. We had a little falling out towards the end of the Anger project. But I didn't realize what was going on, you know what I mean? So my friend told me that he was in rehab and struggling, and it just kicked me in the face, and uh, again, this is pre-internet. Well, maybe not pre-internet, but pre-social media. So it wasn't as easy to get in touch with people. I went to his house. I remember ringing the bell, and his mother answered the door, and just the sweetest woman ever. She was great. She's passed recently, too, a few years ago. I remember she opened the door and she looked at me and she started crying and she called Joe Puggle. Like she called me Joe Puggle. That's what she knew me as. And I was like, Miss Silverman, I'm sorry to call you, but in short, I heard Josh is in rehab, and I just wanted to reach out, thinking like maybe if he thought an old friend was reaching out, it might help. I don't know. Um, but I kind of panicked. I was panicking, to be honest with you. I was like, fuck. Another one of us is gonna fucking check out. I was scared, frankly, and concerned. Anyway, she ended up, letting him know that I stopped by, and he gets out of rehab and he calls me. Let's do something, musically. Now he had John had recently contacted him looking to do something as well because, as you mentioned, they played together in the Has-Beens with Trance and John Anderson. Amazing record. And so he always liked John, really liked playing with Josh. Um, Josh wanted me to play. He wanted to do something with me. Uh, and a few years, the in-between years, I was doing a band called CI Infidels with my friend Jack and um, my friend Jeff on bass. And I was able to recruit Jeff on bass for the Dark Brothers. So that's kind of what led to it. I was reaching out, and he got out of rehab and just wanted to do something. I got the bass player, he got the drummer. Next thing you know, we're in Kevin's studio in Belleville, you know, fleshing something out. Um, yeah, and that's how it started.
And
And I
that,
had similarly, sorry to cut you off like that, but I just want to mention I had a similar thing with John Steele as I did with you. Like I'd see him around and I knew who he was, and he knew of me, but we didn't never really met until then. And that led to a very long standing collaboration between me and John, but because we continued on after the Dark Brothers. But yeah, that's what led to it.
and the Dark Brothers ended up being, if I have it correct, two studio albums and a live recording.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
There's also some live stuff on from WFMU.
Oh, cool. Was that on Pat's show?
Pat Duncan, no. Maybe Joe Belock,
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think.
Yeah, that would probably, yeah, that would make sense. If I recall, Joe, he was more of that, again, that kind of more pop leaning stuff, if I recall.
It's funny you mentioned Pat though, because me and Josh used to go to when WFMU was still in Uppsala College in East Orange. We used to go over there. I remember one time we just grabbed these huge, you know, bottles of cider. I don't know, we were into cider for a while there. And we would just show up. I remember one time we just walked in and Felix Frump, who you mentioned earlier, was playing, and we're just walking around and crazy days. I mean, you just show up someplace like that and like walk around with booze. But But yeah, no, the Dark Brothers, I think they were Joe Pugsley's show. Good guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I do miss the old Upsala College FMU. That was the house. And you'd play and you'd block everybody's driveway and
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
are.
yeah.
Yeah.
Puggle played there a couple times. We also did a hardcore band called the Somethings for a while,
Mm.
and we played Pat Duncan's show a couple times. That was good stuff. Fun times. But yeah, fast forward back to Dark Brothers. Yeah, we did the two studio records. Yeah, and a couple okay live performances. You know.
I really like that stuff.
Thank
Very much.
you.
I think again, when I hit the ground running in like 93-ish, going out and going to shows, I mean, Shirk was great. But I think, both of you individually just hit another place with the Dark Brothers. I think his songwriting was probably the sharpest it had ever been. Um, I mean, there are some moments on those records, man, that fuck me up in the best possible way. And it's the best compliment I can give you.
No,
And
thank you. I appreciate it.
I
No.
listen to it and I'm like, I need to like set a date and time to listen to that shit because it ain't like casual music for me. Um, and I appreciate that. You know, I think there were things being said on those records that mattered, and I think he was really reaching someplace lyrically. But unfortunately, the band, was those two records and that some live stuff. Um, and this is where my chronology gets fuzzy because I'm well out of Jersey, kind of at that point. Um, did the band split up because of Josh's passing, or was it before that time?
It was about a year before, I think. Yeah, no, things, it just, I don't remember what happened. I remember at the time I was finishing up a degree. I had gone back to school and I was working on a philosophy degree. And I remember there was one time where I got really annoyed because he kept canceling practices. It was, but he was starting to struggle a bit more um, as I was, trying my best to be, responsible. And it kind of fizzled out probably about a year before he passed. But I mean, from '04, really, maybe we jammed a little in '03, '04 to '10 to 2010. Um, two records, it's not too bad, I mean, considering everything going on. And I'm really happy that we got those recordings down. Um, the second record as well, Seven Steps to Enlightenment. I'm very proud of that. We did that one analog. Probably the last analog thing I'll do in my life. Uh, um, but yeah, I'm proud of those songs. I'm really proud of what we were able to do together. And then, I mean, the fact that he ended up passing, I mean, yeah, of course, it makes me that much more grateful that we were able to, do that project together and create those songs and get them recorded.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you're right, it's definitely not, background music. It's hard for me to listen to. There's some dark themes, in both of our songs. We're both in sort of dark headspaces, and when we first started hanging out again after the rehab stint, I had been going through some dark times too. So we were both sort of initially, at least, trying to sort of utilize the band as
Mm.
a way to remain positive and kind of move in a more positive direction. And For a while there, it provided that for us. Um, but Unfortunately, you know, he struggled a bit, and in 2011 we lost him.
Mm. As I've said before on this channel, anyone who hasn't heard Josh as just as a songwriter has work to do. He's worth giving a deep dive into, whether it's Shirk Circus plus Tax, which was another band he had, um, Dark Brothers. I'm sure there's tons of other stuff out there. It's really worth looking into. I mean, this was a guy who really had it. And it's difficult for me. I write about music for fun and sometimes for profit. And I have a really hard time describing Josh's songs. To really kind of do them justice. They're gonna say, "Oh yeah, yeah, big star, pop sensibilities, all those catchy things that make it easy." But I guess if I could sum it up, I didn't know him terribly well. I'd run into him at the pipeline and we'd chat. But again, we'd have these great conversations and one of us would forget them by the next time we saw each other. I won't say which one. Um, but the guy was singing from a true place. He was singing from his heart. As cliche as that sounds, I never doubted that what I was listening to was really him. It
Absolutely.
wasn't David Bowie writing, you know, as a character somewhere.
Right.
Josh Silverman was Josh Silverman. He wasn't Davy Jones who became David Bowie. You know what I mean? Um, and
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that came through. So again, if you're watching this and you haven't listened to this guy's music, it's out there. So definitely try to dig some of it up because, as far as our scene in New Jersey, he was a leading light as far as being a songwriter. And, you want these people to live forever too. You want Inger to do 50 albums and have there be box sets of all the unreleased Inger. And, Josh the same way. And it's like, we got what we got. And in some ways, that's enough because they say so much. You know,
Sure.
Sometimes when the output's limited, it says more, you know.
I mean, I think he had a pretty good output. I mean, sure, it could have been better, but he had the three. He ended up doing a third record at some point. So it's the three Shirk records. He had a couple singles. I mean, he played in the Frogs for a while. I mean, you know, Dark Brothers. But it is interesting, right? I think the Dark Brothers is really his only other kind of original band other than Shirk,
Mm.
unless I'm forgetting something.
Well, he did the plus tax thing for a
That's
bit,
right. Yeah, he had that too. Yeah.
yeah. Which, funny enough, I think I may have mentioned this when I had Steele on. Josh and I were at the Pipeline one night, and it was one of those nights where you remember the pavement and not much else. And we were talking and talking, and before I knew it, I had joined Plus Tax. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but we're gonna do this, and it's gonna be awesome. And yeah, I'll talk to you next week. We'll figure it out. Talk to him next week. Hey, I'm Josh, and I'm like, oh fuck. I missed
Mhm.
my chance to play with Josh.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do?
Hey, it, it,
Yeah,
it, it was a fun thought while it lasted. These things happen.
I got nothing. Yeah,
Well, rest in peace, Josh, and thank you for
absolutely.
doing what you did while you were here. Uh,
Yeah.
this isn't going to be a terribly linear conversation because as I'm listening to you and as we're talking, I'm remembering things. There was also rewinding again. There's also the Plug Uglies that you were a part of as well. That was
Yeah,
what, 96, 97, around that time.
something like that. Yeah. Yeah, we did one EP. I had a Big Blue Meanie with the guy, what's his name? Jerry from the Fiends
Oh yeah, Jerry Jones.
and Tim Gillis. They recorded it. Yeah. So, it was pretty good. Dean did some, what do you call it, sax on it.
Oh, Dean from
Dean
Backseat
Bagel. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bagel. Yeah.
No, that was it was great. It was sort of like when I don't, my timeline might be messed up, but they were like the guys who were in Bernie's Fix, and so when Jeff passed away, they started Plug Always without me, and then I ended up joining as I think on bass, but I remember I played some guitar on the recording. Yeah, kind of like again, a kind of punk band with some pop sensibilities. The guy Pete had some really great strong songs that could have been more sort of power pop-ish than punk, but that band was sort of punk in style in regards to execution. But yeah, we did the Plug Uglies. I don't know. It wasn't very long lasting, but it was a fun project.
Yeah. Wasn't there a record on Black Pumpkin? Am I remember that right?
I don't know. I don't, I don't remember if it was officially released. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
know, I mean, Jerry recorded it, so it would make sense, but I don't know.
Yeah. I may have that because I'm pretty sure I played a couple of shows with you around that time
Probably.
with like Anger and the Fiends and like that
Yeah.
thing that was happening.
I remember we played Coney Island High once, and someone walked over to the stage and put a piece of paper down, and when I couldn't see it, and then after I picked up the paper and I looked at it, and it was like a devil horn hands drawn, and someone wrote "I love Soul Asylum." I don't know if it was like a goof, like I kind of took it like he was goofing on us, but I mean, it speaks to the songwriting, which wasn't really mine. It was their songwriting. I was just playing bass and adding layers and vocals in that project. But yeah, it was a fun project for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And swinging back to Inger, wasn't there an interesting run-in when you were playing with Inger that you all had with Henry Rollins at a show?
Yes, yeah. Well, the CB's show was wild because yeah, well, she was pretty tight with Rollins, and so he would come to our shows and stuff. Um, so yeah, Henry he showed up to the show, and as did Jeff Buckley.
Mm.
Uh, at the time, though, I mean, I had heard of him, but I didn't. It's different now. Now he's like an icon because he's been gone so long and it's so amazing. But at the time, I didn't really. I was a little more starstruck with Rollins at the time because I was like younger, Black Flag. Um, but oh yeah, the story that I told, yeah, she wanted us to paint our faces white, like Lou Reed Transformer. And it's funny because I think back and if that was now, I'd be like, whatever, yeah, give me the face paint, let's do it. I don't care. But at the time, I remember me and Josh were like, we don't want to paint our faces up. That's embarrassing. I don't want to do that. So we we uh we somehow got Mr. Rollins to get us out of it. We asked him to get us out of it, and he did. It's kind of fun. Yeah. But also, Jeff, we hung out at Jeff's apartment that night. And again, like I didn't really know who the guy was, and I remember he was really into the new Jesus Lizard record that came out that year, and he was blasting it, like playing air guitar and just like talk. He wouldn't stop talking about the Jesus Lizard record, which was wild. And then not long after that, me and Josh went into the city because Josh was looking to buy weed or some shit, and I was dying because he bought a bag of oregano from somebody in the village, and we're walking through the village, and Jeff comes walking down the street, and we just like run into each other, 1995 Manhattan, right? And, hey, what's up, man? Whatever, we're talking, and it was like, I mean, it was just so casual. I'm like, this fucking, he just bought oregano. I was like cracking on him to him, and just laughed it off, whatever. This guy just bought a bag of oregano from somebody, and you know, but yeah, he was a sweet guy, man. Jeff was unbelievably sweet and chill and fun to hang out with, and you'd never know he was like a big star. Rollins was a little more, off-putting. He wasn't as warm. But he carried my amp out. I remember I remember that half stack, and he walked behind it, crouched down, picked it up, and like like and walked with the half stack behind him. And I was like, what with the head on it, right out the door because he didn't want to stay. He's like, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
So, fun story.
Yeah.
We were also really good that night, which I don't want to lose sight of. I feel like we played really, really well. So I don't want to lose sight of that. I think,
Yeah.
for that small slice of time, we had something good.
Yeah. I can't imagine those songs on the CB stage, how good that must have sounded. Because I think people forget the CB's had the best sound system around. I mean, for that shithole,
Yeah,
the sound was
sounded
unbelievable.
amazing. It
Yeah.
sounded amazing. And I had, my JCM 800 with a Gibson Melody Maker, and Josh was also playing a Melody Maker, and he played through a Fender Bassman, and you had Frank Lieberman on drums, who was a fucking monster, absolute monster on drums. So yeah, it was good times musically for sure.
Yeah. And Jeff's another one. You talk about, singing your song and then moving on. We have Grace and the scattered, unreleased stuff that's been coming out. But as an album, it's like that's it. Perfect. If you're gonna have one album in you,
Oh yeah, yeah,
make it that one. You know what I mean? I mean,
yeah.
beautiful.
Also not background music. Well, actually, it could be. That could actually be both, right? You
Yeah,
could
it
you could deep
depends.
dive and put it on in the back.
I was telling, I think it may have been, you were the last person I said this to, but I've been saying it to other people as well. With that last Inger record, Glory Land, great record, set a date and time to listen to it. Like, give yourself the night off.
Yeah, I got to give it a deep dive. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I need to for sure.
Yeah, like if you can get through the first four songs, you're gonna be okay. But otherwise, holy shit. And that's, it's all conjecture at this point, right? But I do remember thinking when I heard that record, I'm like, this sounds like a swan song to me. Like there's a vibe about that record. I mean, just lyrically speaking, And I tried to get her on this show and she agreed to it, to the point where I'm sitting with the Zoom on and Ingrid didn't show, which is okay. I don't hold it against her. And she gave me some reasons why, some of which were coherent, some weren't. But I think she kind of just said what she wanted to say with that record, and then let that be it. She was very conscious about how she'd be remembered and her legacy because she would say about like 'cause she was doing press for the record and she was going to come on my show, and she's like, I really don't want to talk about how wild I was and all the stuff. I said, I don't particularly care about that stuff anyway. I want to talk to you about this amazing record you've just delivered, produced by a good friend of mine, Paul Rossler. I'm like, I want to dive into this with you. She's like, yeah, everybody's asking me about the same stuff. I'm tired of talking about it. It's just, I'm over it. And she was very concerned about like, I don't want any like male gazy stuff on this interview. I'm like, you're not going to get it. This is here are my I typed up all the questions and sent it to her. I'm like, I will not stray from this. And if I do, you can edit it. You have total control over anything that's aired. I just want you to talk about your record so everybody knows about it. But she seemed very like she was kind of over that shit.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, it was a long time ago. I mean, I'm sure she was in her own way a very different person, even if she still had some of the same behaviors. We all evolve in our own way, and I'm sure in some ways she was very different, and
yeah,
probably didn't want to be defined by a 5-year period in her youth.
right.
It's understandable.
Yeah, totally understandable, but we have that record. We have, well, we have the three records, the full length, the first Nymphs record, Transcendental Medication, the Triple X one, and the Gloryland record. All solid. I mean, talk about front to back, solid records, all three of them. Um, yeah, I mean, it's nice she put that record out, and that's the last one, 'cause I think that says the most, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I said, I got to give it a deep dive. I haven't
Yeah,
gotten
like
to
I
it.
said, take some time.
All right. All right.
And if you need to, call me. I've
I
been
probably will. I probably will. Yeah.
it'll fuck you up, but it'll fuck you up beautifully. Like you'll be grateful for being that fucked up. You know what
I'm
I
ready
mean?
for it. I'm ready for it.
And so we went through the Dark Brothers, and what's really cool is you and John ended up continuing on. You had the 65's for a while, and I remember, that band was doing a lot. I know there were videos on YouTube. Every time I talked to Kim, he's like, "Oh, do the 65's," So I know, you guys had some
So,
stuff going
so
on.
yeah, look, when Dark Brothers fizzled out, me and John wanted to keep playing. At the time, I had some songs that I had written, uh, kind of, in my back pocket that I was ready to go with. And I also felt a lot of what the 65s was initially was really just a rebranding sort of Puggle. I had Puggle songs that I've played with that later version of Puggle that I really liked. I Got You, Walk on Selfishly, the two singles from the first record. They were Puggle songs that I played with Chris Greenspan and Chris Maggio back in 97, 98, but we never recorded. And I thought they were really strong songs of mine. I didn't want to lose them in just the ether of 1998, So I wanted to, there was another song called High School on the record that was from that group. Uh, so yeah, it was sort of like it was an effort to get those songs recorded as well as to keep playing and work on new stuff. So it was a mix of those. It was like a newer version of those songs with John on drums, and then the new songs that we wrote together. Um, Jeff, unfortunately, was struggling a bit too at that time, so it was kind of like half of the Dark Brothers was going in one direction, and the other, me and John were going in another. And sadly, we lost Jeff in 2018 as well. Um, but yeah, John and I, we did the one record. The first record, Strike Hard, with, oddly enough, Dan from Shirk Circus. So it all comes back around. But, you know, jumping in and out of different projects. And Dan had contacted me towards the end of Dark Brothers. I guess he was really into what we were doing with the Dark Brothers. And he worked, no, I'm sorry, he lived near my job at the time. So I was able to like get out of work and we'd hang out and just, drink and work on stuff. And he was getting into recording at the time. So he recorded some of our initial demos. And then yeah, we finished the first record. We put that out. Yeah, and we kept going for a while. We had some lineup changes. Um, Dan had stepped down. Cindy had left, and so it was really just me and John as the constant over the years. Uh, we got Ryan on bass around 2013. Um, and a phenomenal musician, and we ended up getting really tight, and that's who I'm playing with now, in his project. Um, but yeah, we had a few different. We also had a Frankie Fender was on guitar for a while. Unfortunately, we lost him. He's in the I Got You video. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of, it was me trying to do my own thing again, like centered around my writing. There were other contributions, and after Ryan joined, he contributed a lot. We wrote a lot of the more recent stuff we wrote together. The Keep the Lights On single, Never Say Never, he contributed writing on that EP. Yeah, so it was basically centered on it was a band centered around my writing. I was trying to focus on that at the time. And I think we did a good job. I'm proud of what we did, and we kept going up until almost 2020. The COVID hit, and we kind of lost our mojo a little bit. And you know, um, I'm not sure where we're at this point, but yeah, I'd probably around. We went from around 2010 to 2020 kind of thing. About 10 years we existed. Yeah, I would have liked our output to be a little better, but it's not bad. We had the one full length and three or four EPs. You know.
Yeah,
We
that's
got to play Maxwell's towards the end bunch of times, which was fun.
yeah, that's another place I miss a lot. Love the
Oh
Max.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Maxwell's was kind of like my
Hmm.
older club, my older young man club, because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like at that point I was in college, I was having like real adult relationships, it wasn't like you're just, doing whatever. So it's like you want to take a lady out for a date who likes music, but you want to take her out to dinner first. See, there's a restaurant at Maxwell's.
Yeah, yeah. It was a little classier,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A little bit hipper, a little older crowd. You didn't have to worry about getting a boot in the side of your head, that sort of thing. So I dug Maxwell's and spent, a lot of time there after like the pipeline closed and all that. Yeah, that was another fun place. There's not much around, man. I don't know. I mean, what's it looking like in Jersey these days? To me, when I go down to see a show, if someone I really love is playing, I'll make the trip down to Dingbats. But I mean, you just played someplace recently I hadn't heard of before, a couple weekends ago.
Oh, in Asbury?
Yeah, yeah.
It was like um a brewery, I guess they're having shows down in Asbury, Wild Air. I mean, there's spots. There's you know what it is. It's not so much music venues anymore. I think the trend is more you know makeshift music venue within some other kind of business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that seems to be the trend. I think, at best I can see. You know.
As I was gathering up information, as you were sending me some things leading up to this, you had sent me a video by something called Dread Eyes. Um,
Yes.
and really cool video, by the way, and really cool song. Um,
Thank you.
so you're fronting that. When did that fit into the what?
Red Eyes, that was kind of a like I said, we kind of I think 65's played our last show in 2019. There was I think it was what is it, Indie Binge, the Indie Binge. There's a festival kind of thing in Jersey City. Um, and then yeah, the COVID hit and my buddy Ryan was in the band at that time. Because around 2013 we started a label, um, Pyrrhic Victory Recordings, and it was centered around, it was my band. It was 65's and my friend Greg's band Galanos, which I ended up playing bass in, and my friend Dave's band Miss Ohio, and we all had records ready to put out. So we it was just a strength in numbers kind of collective idea. So we started the label and we put all those you know records out together, and worked together for a long time. We still do. Ryan got in the fold, taken over for on bass in the 65's, and we got tight over the years. And when 2020 hit, we were just looking for ways to continue working, so we wouldn't lose our minds. And uh, Ryan at that time was getting more and more into recording at home, um, and he's just a very prolific writer. And so he started sending me stuff. I got full song arrangements, full arrangements down. What do you think it is? I'm like, sound, check this one out, whatever. And so I think Keep the Lights On was the first one he sent me, which we released as a 65 single in 2020. And we got a really good reaction to that one. And then he started sending me more and more full song structures written, and recorded. And I love that. I always loved singing over someone else's writing because we all sort of have patterns that we write in, that sometimes are difficult to escape, uh, certain keys or certain chord progressions, So to really try to sort of expand your phrasing and your vocal range, it's great to sing over someone else's song. So I always loved doing that. And for some reason, me and Ryan just hear each other musically very, very well. He could hear what he could think he thought I would sing well over, and what he would write, I could just hear stuff over. I hear all these melodies in my head. So it was just a great way to work during the pandemic when we couldn't get in the same room together. Great way to work in general, probably. Uh, so yeah, those songs were Ryan's writing the music, and I would write the vocal melody and lyrics, phrasing, and then he would come back and put vocal backups on it as well. Um, and so that's how that came about. Yeah, that one song, Bruce Vane, is probably my favorite. We did an EP, a four-song EP before that. So I think there's only 5 songs out there, but I'm very proud of that. We never played a Dread Eyes show. We never put a band together. So it was essentially a recording project, sort of just to keep going when we couldn't leave our houses. But I'm really proud of those songs. I'm glad you mentioned it. Um, and we speak about it sometimes. It's always possible we'll go back to it. Maybe form a band around it, or maybe just do more recordings. I know he mentioned it a while back that he had some things he was going to send me, but hasn't come to fruition yet. But we'll see. I mean, he's been very busy with Scary Hours, doing a lot with that.
Excellent, excellent. And I'll put a link up for the label in the video
Oh,
description.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot on there, man. Too. I mean, we could probably talk 2 hours just about that.
yeah, I mean, there's a
Um,
lot of music available on the label.
yeah, I mean, when I went to send you that Galanos link, which we didn't even talk about Galanos yet, I clicked the drop down and I'm like, shit, look at all these fucking bands we did. And this was only like 10 years.
Yeah,
We worked with bands from Europe, from France, a couple of really great bands from France, Pam Risare and Julie Seaz. Um, Amazing bands, as well as Alpha Du Centaur, a post-rock band. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
yeah, and I would encourage people to check that stuff out. And another act on the label that we have to get into because you played with, Voice of Doom,
Oh, yes.
another John Steele connection there.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah, everybody in 65 started doing their side projects and then got really into them, which is great. Yeah, John started Voice of Doom and I was playing bass for the first few years. Now Ed from Miss Ohio and also he plays guitar in 65's. He took over on bass. But yeah, fun stuff. Sort of thrashy, misfitsy style kind of punk rock, about horror movies and breakfast cereal. Um, yeah, fun stuff. They're still going.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I know I had Robbie on last year, late last year.
Yeah, yeah, I think he took over for Frankie.
Yeah,
Rest in peace.
yes, of course, of course. It's a funny thing. I was thinking about, because Voice of Doom, um, there was an early incarnation back in the 80s, with Frankie and John. You've worked with John a bunch of years. Robbie's now working, he's been around long enough to have worked with a bunch of people. And it really is like this very small world where people seem to have these things that they never fully disconnect, which is beautiful. They're just kind of variations of the same people in some ways. It's
Yeah, it's fun though. It's fun. Um,
Yeah, taking things in different directions, different bands, but there's the core is sometimes the same depending on what it is. And then there's Whole Shot, which was John and Haim from Voice of Doom, so it just goes on and on and on. Um, but I wanted to make sure before we hit the finish line that we wrap up with any projects we haven't gotten into. Um, I know you're doing things currently. You did a solo recording of a Stiv cover a couple years ago. We got to get into that. So, um, I guess to kind of rapid fire a few things. And you mentioned, Stiv solo, that sort of power pop vibe that he brought to that Disconnected record. You did a cover of The Last Year a couple years back.
yeah, I'm 23.
Yeah. And it's under the name Joe Pugsley. Is there a lot released under that name, or was that the first one?
That's the first one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, probably moving forward, I'll probably drop the 65's name. I mean, I don't know, I might change my mind, but it just sort of feels like it, you know, had its time. That particular record, Disconnected, was just always a big favorite of mine. It's a huge record for me, so I always wanted to uh, record one of those songs. So I was able to do that a couple years ago. Galanos is a project that we didn't really talk too much about that I think is really good that I'm very proud of. Again, not my writing. I was playing bass for my friend Greg, who's an amazing writer, amazing guitar player. And we did that from about 2013 up until COVID time as well. Um, so Galanos, if anyone is doing deep dives here, I definitely recommend that. And currently I'm in Scary Hours, which is Ryan's band, his hardcore band that he started around 2020 as well. Yeah, I'm playing bass in that, and we've been playing a lot of shows. He's booking a lot of shows, so I'm doing that. And also, I mean, if anybody does want to check anything else, check the link for the label because everything was sort of centralized there that we did from 2013 to present. Um, most of it at least is you could find from that website, Pyrrhic Victory Recordings. Uh, yeah, but I did the Stiv thing I did, and I have some solo stuff, and I have some guys that I'm thinking about working with or asking to work with. So, I'm never far from my next project. But Scary Hours has been keeping me busy right now, so um, sort of focusing on that and trying to finish up the songs that I do have, so that when I am ready, I can present them, fully written to my next project, my next band members.
Excellent. I'm sure if we were to reconnect in a year or two, there probably would be a bunch of new stuff to get into. That's one thing I realized when I was prepping for this is how extensive your output has been. And that's really cool to see, man. Because like I said, I remember, we were kind of in the same spaces 30 years ago. And to see you, consistently doing stuff all those years and doing so much now is really cool, So for the viewer who's new to Joe's music, I will put up as much linkage as I can to get people to check this stuff out. And especially, I mentioned the Dark Brothers. That's a huge one for me. Some of that stuff is out and about as well. So there's a lot of great music to dig into here. And I'm really happy to see things are happening in 2025, and that's always the most important time is where we are today. So, definitely keep me posted on where things go from here. And I'm sure we'll reconnect at one of Kevin's things in the future. It seems to be where everybody reconnects these days. So,
Next Labor Day.
yes, yes, we'll definitely plan on that,
All
and
right.
it's a good pool to draw from for this channel too, because it's like,
Oh, definitely.
yeah, right into people. And one of these days, Steve Mill, you're coming on my fucking show.
Good luck.
Stop dodging me. Like everybody else from your fucking band. And
You
yeah.
got to get them. You got to get them to do it.
Hey, I gotta complete the circle. I got everybody else from EF on, I gotta have Miller, but we'll see. We'll see. But listen, man, this has been great.
Fun stuff, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm really happy to had a proper chat with you after not having one for about 30 years and then starting up in 2025. So I'm delighted that's taken.
Better, better
And
late than never.
yeah, and listen, next time, you put out your next record or what have you, let me know. I write reviews as well on the website and stuff. So, always,
Sure, man. Absolutely. Thank you.
yeah, always happy to help spread the word, man.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
My pleasure.